Here are some more examples of domain from a graph, because this is one of the most important concepts that I want you to take away from this class, is how to deal with holes in a graph. Okay, so reminder, we are using interval notation. You are going to use a bracket anytime you see a closed end dot, and you will use parentheses for holes anytime you see an asymptote, a vertical asymptote, or if you have a positive or negative infinity. Okay. I recommend that you actually pause the video and try and do these four here without watching, and then check your answers with me. But otherwise, I'm going to go on. Okay, so let's find the domain of this first graph here. You always read domain from left to right. You only talk about the x-axis. Okay, so my graph starts here at this definite starting point, which is at x equals -4. And it goes all the way until, oh, there's a hole here at x equals 1. So from my definite endpoint, that's a closed end dot, so use a bracket, to 1, there's a parentheses. Anytime you have a hole, you need to have the parentheses and then put the 1 again. Unless there's a physical gap, these numbers should be the exact same. A physical, what's that, horizontal gap, then these numbers should be the same. All right, so from the other side of the hole, pick up at the other side of the hole to continue on. We keep going forever and ever, and this is the positive infinity side of the x-axis, or like a number line. So that would be my answer here. If, on the other hand, we had had a dot here, then when you did this domain, you would say, okay, we have a definite starting point at -4. And we go and we go and we go, oh, we hit a hole, but this dot fills in our hole because it's on the same vertical line. So we ignore that this even exists. Do not mention 1 in this domain because we had this closed dot here, which fills in or plugs your hole. Do not mention 1. Don't put 1 with brackets. Don't do any of that. But we're going to just keep going on, pretend that we just filled in the hole, and we end at positive infinity. Okay, so if you don't have a closed-end dot to fill in your hole, you need to actually mention the hole and put it in your domain. If you do have a closed-end dot, then you don't mention the hole, and you ignore that it even exists. Don't mention the 1 at all. Okay, next example. I meant to draw in a hole for us, not a hole, a dot for us. Okay, we read this graph from left to right. So at the negative infinity side of the x-axis, we have an arrow. So we're starting at negative infinity. And we go, and here's a hole. But there's a dot here in the same vertical line to plug in our hole. So we pretend that hole doesn't even exist. Do not mention it. All right, here's a second hole. It's at x equals 1.5. You can kind of estimate that. So we need to put 1.5 with a parentheses, and we pick right back up on the other side of the hole, so 1.5 and 1.5. We continue on, and we end at an arrow. This is the positive infinity side of our graph, so that is our answer. So when there is a hole that is not plugged in, you mention it. When there is a hole that is plugged in, we don't mention it. We don't mention -2 whatsoever. That shows up again in these two examples. So from example, what's this? Example 4, we have a definite starting point here at this open circle at -4. And from left to right we go, we hit a hole, but there's a dot here to close it in, to fill it in. So ignore -2. We hit another hole at 1. There's no dot in this vertical line, so I need to actually list it in my domain. And list 1 again because we pick up on the other side of the hole and go to this dot at 4. It is a dot, so use a bracket. And then for your last example, we start on the left side. This is the negative infinity side with an arrow, and we hit a hole here. At -2, there are no other dots to fill this in, so I need to leave it out of my domain. We have another hole here, but this time there is a dot to plug it in at 2, so we do not mention it. And then we end at 4. So if there is a plug for your hole, don't mention it in your domain.